Health officials in London have found persistent traces of the polio virus in samples taken from the sewers in North and East London between the months of February and May of 2022. And in New York, a man became paralyzed from polio in July of 2022. The question is, are we in a position to prevent the reemergence of polio as a major public health emergency? Evidence shows that polio has been around for millennia. The funerary stele of the Egyptian priest Ruma from the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt, which existed from 1570 to 1342 BCE, shows the priest with a shrunken right leg and foot, similar to changes seen in paralytic polio. And a mummy of the Egyptian pharaoh Siptah from the 19th dynasty, which existed from 1342 to 1197, showed similar changes in the left leg and foot of the pharaoh. Up until the end of the 19th century, polio was a sporadic disease, and then without warning, it erupted into an epidemic disease that terrorized the world. Every year during the summer, epidemics of polio raged through the industrialized cities of the world, leaving in their wakes tens of thousands of disabled people and thousands more dead. Polio is a virus that infects the throat and the bowels of humans and the great apes, and it exists in three types: type 1, type 2, and type 3. Humans are the only known reservoirs of the polio virus. The virus spreads from person to person in secretions from the throat and in feces, and the virus can survive at room temperature for weeks. If the temperature is lower, from say 0 degrees to 8 degrees Celsius, that would be 32 degrees to 46 degrees Fahrenheit, the virus can exist for months. What is even more interesting is that this virus is resistant to 70% alcohol and other laboratory disinfectants. When the wild polio virus enters the mouth, it makes its way to the throat and the bowel, where it binds the receptors there and then replicates and infects cells in that area. It then makes its way into the blood circulation and can then travel to the central nervous system, where it destroys motor neurons. Motor neurons are those neurons that are important for movement of muscles and movement of limbs. This results in a limb paralysis without the loss of sensation. Previously healthy people, within the space of just 4 days, can become profoundly disabled and be relegated to a lifetime in a wheelchair or on crutches, or back in the day in an iron lung, these days attached to a respirator. Fortunately, however, it is only 1 in 150 infections with polio that progress to paralytic polio. The rest are just mild infections with symptoms such as a sore throat, a low fever, and that recover completely within a week. A full 70% of all polio infections are without any symptoms at all. And these people can continue to spread the virus in their environment. Now, polio emerged as a major epidemic disease in the industrialized nations of the world, in the USA and in Europe, during the late 19th century. The first epidemics presented as small outbreaks of up to 14 people near Oslo in Norway in 1868, and a small outbreak in northern Sweden of 13 people in 1881. This was quite unusual because these countries were making major advances in sanitation and hygiene precisely at this time. So why was polio emerging as an epidemic disease at the exact time that advances were being made in sanitation and hygiene? Well, there is a plausible explanation. What is believed is that as sanitation improved, childhood exposure to the polio virus decreased. And this meant that fewer and fewer children were developing immunity to the polio virus. And as the number of susceptible children and young adults increased, this presented fertile ground for the virus to spread and multiply, giving rise to the epidemics of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The disease became the terror of the time. Parents isolated their children and kept them away from swimming pools and playgrounds and cinemas. The people were advised not to drink from public fountains. Families that had cases of paralytic polio had their names and their addresses printed in the daily newspaper for everyone to see. People lived in abject fear of the disease until Jonas Salk at the University of Pittsburgh developed the first vaccine. It was an injectable vaccine that was made from an inactivated or killed virus. A massive immunization campaign followed in the United States. This was funded by the March of Dimes, a foundation that was founded by Franklin D. Roosevelt to research polio and to assist Americans who were suffering from the disease. The campaign resulted in a precipitous drop in the number of polio cases every year, from a peak of 58,000 to 5,600. Then in 1960, Albert Sabin at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital developed an oral vaccine, a vaccine that can be taken by mouth, known as the OPV. And this vaccine was made from a live but weakened virus. The vaccine was cheaper to produce, it was easier to administer, and it produced a longer lasting immunity. On top of that, this vaccine could be cultured, made in cells in a laboratory, whereas the Salk injectable vaccine required the sacrifice of 1,500 monkeys for every million doses of the vaccine. These advantages quickly made the OPV, or the oral vaccine, the vaccine of choice for most national immunization programs. And in 1962, Cuba became one of the first countries to eradicate polio with the use of the OPV, the oral vaccine. Then, in 1985, PAHO, or the Pan American Health Organization, set a goal to eliminate polio from Latin America and the Caribbean. The result of this was that within 9 years, those regions were declared completely polio free. With the success seen in the Americas, the World Health Assembly in 1988 set a goal of global elimination of polio. This was a tremendous success and achieved a 99.9% decrease in the incidence of polio worldwide. And it also eliminated the wild type 2 and type 3 viruses from the globe. Today, wild type 1 virus only circulates in 2 countries, in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. And these 2 countries reported only 5 cases of polio in 2021, compared to 140 in 2020. Today, 5 of the 6 World Health Organization regions have been officially declared wild polio virus free. But polio was fighting back. During the development of the oral vaccine, scientists had noted that vaccinees, that is, persons who had received the vaccine, continued to excrete the virus in their stool. This virus sometimes reverted to a virulent strain that caused paralytic polio in the vaccinees as well as in people in their environment. From January 2020 to April 2022, 1,868 cases of vaccine-derived polio were reported from 33 countries. Recognizing that the risks of the OPV, the oral vaccine, were greater than their benefits, many of the industrialized and developed nations of the world switched to the IPV, or the injectable type of the vaccine. However, developing nations were not able to afford the cost of the switch and continued to use oral polio vaccine, which perpetuated outbreaks of vaccine-derived polio and allowed the spread of vaccine-derived polio to other surrounding countries in the bowels of travelers who had been vaccinated with the oral polio vaccine. Thus, in July of 2022, New York City announced the first case of polio since 2013. The individual who developed polio was not vaccinated. They developed muscle weakness and became paralyzed. Studies done on the virus at the time showed that the virus was the weakened type of virus that was used in vaccines. This was a case of vaccine-derived polio. It is estimated that it would only cost $1 billion to supply all the developing nations with the injectable type of vaccine. All things taken into consideration, that is a small price for us to pay to save thousands of human lives. Thank you for watching. If you found this video useful, like and share the video with your friends and family. Leave your comments in the box below and support the channel by subscribing. Until the next video, stay healthy and stay safe.